In a world fractured by the clamor of conflict, where the hum of cities drowns out the whispers of the heart, there is a moment, a fleeting pause where humanity stands at a crossroads. Picture a young woman named Elena standing in the midst of a bustling city square. Horns blare, screens flash with breaking news of wars and division, and the weight of her own life presses down a demanding job, a fractured family, and a gnawing sense of disconnection. She clutches her phone, scrolling through endless notifications, searching for something to anchor her. Yet in this chaos, she feels utterly alone. Her heart aches for meaning, for peace, for something greater than the noise. It's a feeling we all know too well, the ache of a war torn world, not just in distant lands, but within our own souls. Elena's story is ours. We live in an age where battles rage on multiple fronts, nations clash, ideologies collide, and within us, personal struggles simmer, stress, doubt, anger, and fear. The world feels like a storm, and we are ships tossed upon its waves, desperate for a harbor. Yet, in this very moment of unrest, a voice rises above the din, gentle yet resolute, calling us to a different way. It is the voice of Pope Francis echoing the timeless teachings of Jesus Christ, urging us toward compassion, toward healing, toward love. In a world that suffers, Pope Francis writes in Fratelli Tutti, where we are all called to be brothers and sisters, to build bridges, not walls. These words are not mere poetry, they are a blueprint for transforming our lives and our world. Let us begin with a teaching that lies at the heart of both Christ's message and Pope Francis' vision, the call to love our neighbor as ourselves. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is asked, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment? He responds, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22:37-39. Simple words, yet they carry the weight of eternity. Pope Francis expands on this in Laudato Si, reminding us that love for our neighbor extends beyond those we know. It includes the stranger, the marginalized, and even the earth itself. Everything is interconnected, he writes, and genuine care for our own lives and our relationships with nature is inseparable from fraternity, justice, and faithfulness to others. But what does it mean to love our neighbor in a world as fractured as ours? For Elena standing in that city square, the idea feels distant, almost impossible. Her neighbor is the co worker who snaps at her, the stranger who cuts her off in traffic, the family member who hasn't spoken to her in months. How can she love them when her own heart feels so heavy? This is where the teachings of Christ and Pope Francis become not just ideals, but lifelines. They invite us to see love not as a feeling, but as an action, a choice, a daily practice that begins in the smallest moments. Consider a story from a small village in Rwanda where the scars of the 1994 genocide still linger. There, a woman named Immaculée, who lost her entire family to the violence, found herself face to face with the man who had wielded the machete. Her heart trembled with pain, yet she heard a whisper within, a call to forgive, to love, to heal. Inspired by Christ's command to love even our enemies, she chose to forgive him. She didn't deny her pain or pretend the past hadn't happened. Instead, she extended a hand, offering him a chance to rebuild, to work together for their community's future. Today, they are not enemies, but neighbors working side by side to plant crops and teach children. Immaculate's story is a testament to the radical power of love as an action, a power that can heal even the deepest wounds. Pope Francis speaks of this in Evangelii Gaudium, where he calls us to a culture of encounter. He writes, "We must never forget that true power at any level is service which reaches its highest expression in the gift of self." For Elena and for us, this culture of encounter begins with small intentional steps. It's the choice to listen to a coworker's frustrations instead of dismissing them, to offer a smile to the stranger on the bus, to pick up the phone and mend a broken relationship. These acts may seem small, but they are the threads that weave a tapestry of compassion, stitching together a world torn apart. So, how do we live this out in our daily lives? Let's walk with Elena as she begins her journey. That evening, after leaving the city square, she sits in her apartment, the weight of the day still heavy on her shoulders. She recalls a homily she heard at church where the priest shared Pope Francis's words: "Compassion is not a vague sentiment, but a firm and persevering determination to commit oneself to the common good." Inspired, Elena decides to take one small step. She thinks of her coworker Mark, who has been short tempered lately. Instead of avoiding him, she resolves to approach him with kindness. The next day, she brings him a coffee and asks how he's doing. To her surprise, Mark opens up about his struggles, a sick parent, financial stress, and the fear of failing at his job. In that moment, Elena sees him not as an obstacle, but as a person carrying burdens just as she does. Their conversation doesn't solve everything, but it's a start, a bridge built where a wall once stood. This is the first practical step. See the person, not the problem. When we encounter someone who frustrates us, we can pause and ask, what might they be carrying? This simple question shifts our perspective, opening the door to compassion. Christ modeled this in his encounters with the Samaritan woman at the well, with Zacchaeus, the tax collector, with the woman caught in adultery. He saw their humanity, their struggles, their potential for redemption. Pope Francis echoes this in his call to go to the peripheries to seek out those who are overlooked and offer them dignity. Another step is to practice small acts of service. Elena begins to incorporate this into her life. She volunteers at a local food bank where she meets people from all walks of life: single mothers, veterans, immigrants. Each interaction teaches her something new about the beauty of humanity. One day, she meets a man named Javier who shares his story of fleeing violence in his home country. His resilience inspires her, and she realizes that service is not just about giving, but about receiving the gift of another's story, their strength, their hope. Pope Francis reminds us in Gaudete et Exsultat that holiness is found in these everyday acts. Very often, it is a holiness found in our next door neighbors, those who living in our midst reflect God's presence. A third step is to cultivate silence. In a world of constant noise, silence is a radical act. Elena begins to set aside 10 minutes each evening to sit quietly, to pray, to reflect. She uses the words of Christ as her guide. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. In these moments, she feels the weight of her stress begin to lift. She journals her thoughts, asking herself, where did I see God today? Where can I love better tomorrow? This practice grounds her, helping her face the chaos of the world with clarity and peace. Pope Francis speaks of this in Amoris Laetitia, urging us to create spaces of contemplation where we can hear God's voice and discern his call. As Elena embraces these steps, she begins to notice a change. Her heart feels lighter, her relationships stronger, her purpose clearer. She still faces stress and conflict, but she approaches them differently. She sees her life as part of a larger story, a story of healing, of compassion, of God's love, made visible through her actions. This is the transformative power of living out Christ's teachings amplified by Pope Francis's call to action. It's not about perfection, but about progress, about taking one step at a time toward a world where love prevails. Let's pause for a moment and consider another story, one that brings this teaching into a different light. In a small town in the Midwest, a man named Tom runs a hardware store. His town has been hit hard by economic decline, and tensions are high. Neighbors argue over politics, jobs are scarce, and trust is thin. Tom, a devout Catholic, feels the strain in his own life. Customers snap at him, his teenage daughter is distant, and he worries about keeping his store afloat. One day he reads a passage from Pope Francis's Fratelli Tutti. We need to acknowledge that we are constantly tempted to ignore others, especially the weak. Let us admit that we have had to make a personal and communal effort to remain close to the poor and the marginalized. These words hit Tom like a lightning bolt. He realizes he's been so focused on his own struggles that he's overlooked the struggles of those around him. Inspired, Tom decides to act. He starts by reaching out to his daughter Sarah. Instead of lecturing her about her attitude, he invites her to help at the store. They spend an afternoon organizing shelves, and slowly she begins to open up about her fierce pressure at school, uncertainty about the future. Tom listens, really listens, and their bond begins to heal. Next, he turns to his community. He notices a regular customer, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly widow who always seems lonely. Tom starts checking in on her, dropping off groceries or fixing a leaky faucet. These small acts ripple outward. Mrs. Thompson, touched by his kindness, begins baking cookies for the store's customers, sparking conversations and connections among neighbors. Tom's story shows us that compassion is contagious. When we choose to love our neighbor, we create a chain reaction, a ripple effect that can transform a community. Pope Francis calls this social friendship a commitment to the common good that transcends differences and builds unity. Christ embodied this in his ministry, eating with sinners, healing the sick, and welcoming the outcast. For Tom and for us, it's about taking the first step, even when it feels uncomfortable or inconvenient. As we reflect on Elena and Tom's stories, we see a common thread: the courage to act. Love is not passive, it requires us to move, to reach out, to risk, yet it's a risk worth taking. Imagine a world where each of us chose one act of compassion each day, a kind word, a helping hand, a moment of forgiveness. These acts multiplied across millions of lives could heal the war torn corners of our world, from personal conflicts to global crises. So, where do we go from here? Let's return to Elena, who is now walking home from the food bank, her heart full. The city still buzzes around her, but she feels different, more grounded, more hopeful. She thinks of Christ's words: "By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." John 13:35. She realizes that her small acts of compassion are not just for others, but for herself, a way to find peace in a chaotic world. Pope Francis echoes this in Christus Vivit, writing, "Young people, do not let the world drag you into a life of isolation. Go out, meet others, and discover the beauty of living for something greater." For each of us, the invitation is the same. We are called to be healers, bridge builders, bearers of light. Start where you are, with a coworker, a neighbor, a stranger. Listen to their story. Offer a small act of kindness. Create a moment of silence to hear God's voice. These are not grand gestures, but seeds planted in faith that grow into something extraordinary. As the sun sets over the city, Elena pauses to look at the skyline. The noise is still there, but it no longer overwhelms her. She feels a spark of hope, a sense that she is part of something bigger, a movement of compassion, a call to heal a war torn world. And in that moment, she knows she is not alone. You are not alone. Together, Guided by the teachings of Christ and the wisdom of Pope Francis, we can build a world where love is the loudest voice, where every heart finds a home. This is just the beginning. The journey continues not with a new chapter, but with a deeper step into the lives of those around us, where compassion becomes not just an idea, but a way of life. Elena steps into her apartment, the faint glow of streetlights filtering through her window. The city's pulse still hums outside, but tonight it feels less like a storm and more like a rhythm, a reminder that life moves forward, carrying her along. Her time at the food bank lingers in her mind, the faces of Javier and others etched into her heart. She sits at her small kitchen table, a cup of tea steaming in her hands, and opens her journal. The words of Pope Francis from a recent address echo in her thoughts. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the courage to embrace dialogue, to seek understanding, to forgive. She scribbles them down, feeling their weight. Peace, she realizes, is not something that happens to us, it's something we build brick by brick, choice by choice. This truth feels both liberating and daunting. Elena thinks of her estranged sister Sofia, who lives just a few miles away but feels a world apart. Their last conversation months ago ended in sharp words and silence. The pain of that rift gnaws at her, a quiet war within her own family. She wonders if peace is possible, not just in the world but in her own heart. Pope Francis' words, rooted in Christ's teachings, offer a path forward. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give it to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled." John 14:27. This peace, Elena realizes, is not a passive calm, but an active pursuit, a gift that requires us to open our hands and receive it through action. The pursuit of peace is a cornerstone of both Christ's ministry and Pope Francis' mission. In Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis writes, "Peace is a craft requiring patience, creativity, and a willingness to listen." He calls us to be artisans of peace, to weave reconciliation into the fabric of our lives. For Elena, this means confronting the conflict with Sophia, not with anger or defensiveness, but with humility and a desire to understand. It's a daunting task, but the stories of others who have walked this path inspire her to try. Consider the story of a man named Ahmed, a Syrian refugee who resettled in a small German town. Ahmed carried the weight of war in his bones, memories of bombs falling, of loved ones lost, of a home reduced to rubble. When he arrived in Germany, he faced suspicion from some locals, their fear of outsiders palpable. Yet Ahmed chose a different response. Inspired by his faith and the words of Christ, "Blessed are the peacemakers," Matthew said 5:9, he began inviting neighbors to his apartment for tea. Over cups of strong sweet tea, he shared his story, not to accuse or defend, but to connect. Slowly, walls came down. Neighbors who once avoided him began to listen, to share their own fears, to see him as a person, not a threat. Today, Ahmed's tea gatherings are a weekly tradition, a small but powerful act of peace building in a community once divided. Ahmed's story resonates with Elena. She sees in him the courage to initiate, to reach out despite the risk of rejection. Pope Francis speaks of this in Evangelically Gaudium, urging us to take the first step, to be the ones who approach others, who build bridges of dialogue. For Elena, this means picking up the phone and calling Sophia. Her hands tremble as she dials, the weight of their last argument heavy in her chest. When Sophia answers, her voice is guarded, but Elena presses forward. "I miss you," she says simply. "Can we talk?" It's not a grand gesture, but it's a start, a crack in the wall that separates them. This is the first lesson of peace building. Take the first step even when it's hard. Christ modeled this when he washed the disciples' feet, a humble act that broke through their pride and confusion. John 13:117. Pope Francis echoes this in his call to go out to others, to initiate reconciliation even when we feel wronged. For us, this might mean reaching out to a friend we've drifted from, apologizing to a colleague, or simply listening to someone whose views differ from our own. It's not about erasing differences, but about creating space for understanding. Elena and Sophia agree to meet at a quiet cafe. As they sit across from each other, the air is thick with unspoken words. Elena feels the urge to defend herself, to list all the ways Sophia hurt her. But she remembers a practical step she read in a spiritual book inspired by Pope Francis: listen before you speak. In Amoris Laetitia, Pope Francis writes, listening is much more than hearing. It is a way of making room for the other, of allowing their truth to emerge. Elena takes a deep breath and asks, how have you been? Really, Sophia? Hesitates, then begins to share her struggles at work, her loneliness, her fear that their family is falling apart. As Elena listens, she feels her own defenses soften. She sees Sophia not as an adversary but as a sister carrying her own burdens. This moment of listening is transformative. It doesn't resolve everything, but it creates a bridge, a fragile one, but a bridge nonetheless. Elena shares her own struggles, her stress, her longing to reconnect. They don't agree on everything, but they agree to keep talking. This is the second step: listen with the heart. Christ exemplified this in his encounters, like when he sat with the Samaritan woman at the well, listening to her story before offering her living water. John 4 7:26. For us, listening might mean putting down our phone during a conversation, asking open ended questions, or resisting the urge to interrupt. It's a discipline that turns conflict into connection. As Elena reflects on this encounter, she realizes that peace building is not just about resolving conflict, but about creating a culture of care. Pope Francis speaks of this in Laudato Si, where he connects peace with care for creation. Peace, justice, and care for our common home are deeply intertwined, he writes. Elena begins to see her life as part of this larger tapestry. She starts small, bringing reusable bags to the grocery store, planting herbs on her balcony, and supporting local businesses. These acts feel modest, but they ground her in a sense of purpose, a way to contribute to a more peaceful world. Let's shift to another story, one that deepens this vision of peace. In a crowded urban neighborhood, a teacher named Maria faces her own battles. Her classroom is a microcosm of the world's tensions. Students from different backgrounds clash. Social media fuels drama, and the pressure to perform leaves everyone on edge. Maria, a woman of faith, feels overwhelmed. One day she reads Pope Francis' words in Christus Vivit Young People. You are called to be builders of peace, to show the world that differences can be a source of richness, not division. Inspired, Maria decides to transform her classroom into a laboratory of peace. She begins by introducing a peace circle, a weekly gathering where students share their thoughts and feelings without judgment. At first, the students are skeptical, but Maria persists, modeling vulnerability by sharing her own struggles. Slowly, the circle becomes a safe space. A student named Jamal, who often lashes out, shares his fear of failing and disappointing his family. Another student, Aisha, talks about the prejudice she faces because of her hijab. As they listen to each other, the students begin to see beyond stereotypes, to recognize each other's humanity. Maria also incorporates service projects like cleaning up a local park, which give the students a shared purpose. Over time, the classroom transforms. Conflicts still arise, but they're met with dialogue, not division. Maria's story shows us a third step: create spaces for encounter. Pope Francis calls this a culture of encounter, where people come together to share their stories and dreams. Christ created such spaces in his ministry, gathering people around tables on hillsides and by the sea. For us, this might mean hosting a family dinner to reconnect, starting a book club to discuss big ideas, or organizing a community event to bring neighbors together. These spaces don't erase conflict, but they make peace possible by fostering understanding. Elena, inspired by her progress with Sophia, decides to create her own space for encounter. She invites a few co-workers to a weekly lunch at a nearby park. At first, it's just casual conversation, but over time they begin to open up about their stresses, their hopes, their lives outside work. One coworker, Priya, shares her struggle to balance her career with caring for her aging parents. Another, David, admits he feels isolated in the city. These lunches become a lifeline, a place where they can be real with each other. Elena realizes that peace is not just about resolving big conflicts, but about building relationships that sustain us through life's storms. A fourth step emerges: forgive even when it's hard. Forgiveness is at the heart of Christ's message, most powerfully shown on the cross. When he prayed, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Luke 23:34. Pope Francis amplifies this in Fratelli Tutti, writing, forgiveness does not mean forgetting or excusing harm, but choosing to love despite the pain. Elena faces this challenge with Sophia. As they continue to talk, old wounds resurface, misunderstandings, betrayals, moments of neglect. Elena feels the sting of those memories, but she chooses to forgive not because it's easy, but because it's freeing. She writes Sophia a letter expressing her love and her desire to move forward. Sophia responds with her own apology, and though their relationship is still a work in progress, forgiveness has opened a door to healing. Forgiveness is not a one time act, but a journey. For Maria, it means forgiving a student who disrespects her, recognizing his behavior comes from pain, not malice. For Ahmed, it means forgiving those who judged him, choosing to see their fear as human, not evil. For us, forgiveness might mean letting go of a grudge against a friend, releasing anger toward a parent, or even forgiving ourselves for past mistakes. It's a step that requires courage, but it paves the way for peace. As Elena, Maria, and Ahmed show us, peace is a craft. As Pope Francis says, a work of art we create through small intentional choices. These choices ripple outward, transforming not just our lives, but the world around us. Imagine a world where each of us took one step toward peace each day, a conversation, a listening ear, a moment of forgiveness. These acts multiplied across billions of lives could shift the tide, turning a war torn world into a garden of hope. Elena closes her journal, the tea now cold, but her heart warm. She thinks of Christ's promise. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. John 16:33. She feels that peace now not as an absence of trouble, but as a strength to face it. Pope Francis' words in Gaudete et Exsultat come to mind. We are all called to be holy by living our lives with love and by bearing witness in everything we do, wherever we find ourselves. Elena knows she's not perfect, but she's trying, and that's enough. The city outside her window is still alive, its lights twinkling like stars. Elena feels connected to it in a new way, not as a place of chaos, but as a canvas for compassion. She thinks of Sofia, of her co workers, of Javier at the food bank, and she knows her work is just beginning. Peace is not a destination, but a path, one she walks with faith, guided by the teachings of Christ and the wisdom of Pope Francis. And as she steps into that path, she carries a quiet confidence that she is not alone, that we are not alone in the sacred work of healing a war torn world. The journey deepens, weaving through the lives of others, where peace becomes not just a hope, but a reality, built one courageous choice at a time. The city wakes to a new dawn, its skyline softened by the golden hues of morning. Elena stands on her balcony, the herbs she planted now sprouting green against the concrete. The air carries the faint hum of life cars, starting voices rising, the world stirring. Her heart too is stirring alive with a sense of purpose that has grown through her efforts to reconnect with Sophia and build bridges with her co workers. Yet a deeper question tugs at her. How do we hold on to hope when the world's wound seems so vast? The news still speaks of wars, inequality, and division, and her own life though brighter, is not immune to setbacks. Yesterday, a heated argument at work left her shaken, and a text from Sophia went unanswered. The path of peace, she realizes, is not a straight line but a winding road demanding resilience and a steadfast heart. This question of hope is where the teachings of Christ and Pope Francis converge with profound clarity. In the Gospel of John, Jesus tells his disciples, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. John 15:5. These words are a lifeline, a reminder that hope is not a fleeting emotion, but a rooted connection to something eternal. Pope Francis builds on this in Spes non confundit, his 2024 encyclical on hope. Writing hope is not an illusion or a denial of reality. It is the courage to trust in God's promises, to act with love, and to believe that even in darkness, light can emerge. For Elena and for us, this hope is a call to remain connected to the vine, to draw strength from faith, and to bear fruit in a world that desperately needs it. Hope, in this sense, is not passive optimism, but an active choice, a commitment to see possibility where others see despair. Elena thinks of her co-worker Priya, who shared her struggles during their park lunches. Priya's exhaustion from caring for her parents while working long hours mirrors a broader reality, the weight of responsibility that so many carry. Elena wonders how she can offer hope not just to Priya, but to herself when the demands of life feel relentless. The answer lies in a teaching Pope Francis often emphasizes: the power of solidarity. In Fratelli Tutti, he writes, solidarity means much more than acts of generosity. It is a way of thinking and acting that recognizes our shared humanity, our common destiny, and our responsibility to lift each other up. Christ modeled this in his life, from feeding the 5,000 to comforting the grieving, always showing that hope is born in community, in standing together. To explore this, let's meet Daniel, a nurse in a busy urban hospital. Daniel's days are a blur of beeping monitors, grieving families, and the constant pressure of understaffing. Burnout looms like a shadow, and the stories of suffering he witnesses: patients without insurance, families torn by addiction, children caught in cycles of poverty, threaten to erode his faith. Yet Daniel clings to a memory from his childhood when his grandmother would read him the Beatitudes: Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Matthew 5:4. Inspired by this and Pope Francis' call to be missionaries of hope, Daniel decides to act. He starts a support group for hospital staff, a place to share their struggles and find strength together. The group begins small, just a few nurses gathering after shifts, but it grows into a lifeline. They cry, laugh, pray, and remind each other why they chose this work. Daniel also begins visiting patients who have no family, sitting with them, listening to their stories, offering a hand to hold. These acts don't erase the hospital's challenges, but they kindle a light of hope, showing that even in pain, connection can heal. Daniel's story resonates with Elena. She sees in him a reflection of her own desire to make a difference, however small. Solidarity, she realizes, is not about solving every problem, but about showing up, about being present. She decides to reach out to Priya, not with grand solutions, but with a simple offer. I'm here, she texts. If you ever need to talk or just grab coffee, let me know. Priya responds with gratitude, and they meet the next day. Over coffee, Priya shares the toll of her responsibilities, the guilt of not doing enough for her parents, the fear of burning out. Elena listens, not rushing to fix things, but offering her presence. She suggests they take a walk in the park, a small break from the chaos. As they walk, Priya's shoulders relax, and she smiles for the first time in weeks. It's a moment of hope, fragile but real, born from solidarity. This is the first practical step. Be present for someone. Christ's ministry was defined by his presence. He was there fully with the people he met, from the lepers to the disciples. Pope Francis echoes this in Gaudete et Exultat, urging us to live in the present moment where God meets us. For us, this might mean checking in on a friend who's been quiet, sitting with a family member in silence, or volunteering at a local shelter. Presence is a gift that says, you are not alone, and in that gift, hope takes root. Elena begins to weave this into her life. At work, she notices David, the co worker who felt isolated in the city. During a break, she invites him to join the park lunches, and though he's hesitant, he agrees. Over time, David opens up, sharing his love for photography and his struggle to find community. Elena encourages him to bring his camera to the park, and soon he's capturing moments of their gatherings, laughter, sunlight filtering through trees, hands holding coffee cups. These photos become a visual reminder of their connection, a small but powerful symbol of hope. David's demeanor shifts. He stands taller, smiles more, and begins to see the city not as a lonely place, but as a home. A second step emerges: celebrate the small victories. Pope Francis often speaks of the joy of the gospel, a joy that comes from recognizing God's work in the everyday. In Evangelii Gaudium, he writes, we must not be afraid to see the beauty of God's presence in the small things, for it is there that he transforms our lives. Christ celebrated these moments. Think of the joy at the wedding at Cana, where he turned water into wine. John 2 1 to 11. Or his delight in the faith of the centurion. Matthew 8 5 to 13. For Elena, celebrating small victories means acknowledging progress. A good conversation with Sophia, a moment of connection with Priya David's growing confidence. She starts a habit of writing down one thing each day that brought her hope: a kind word, a shared laugh, a task completed. This practice shifts her perspective, helping her see light even on hard days. Let's shift to another story, one that deepens this vision of hope. In a rural community in Brazil, a farmer named Clara faces a different kind of struggle. Drought has ravaged her crops, and her village is divided over how to survive. Some want to leave, others to fight for their land. Clara, a woman of deep faith, feels the weight of despair. One Sunday, her priest shares a passage from Pope Francis's Laudato Si Hope, would have us recognize that there is always a way out, that we can always redirect our steps, that we can always do something to solve our problems. Inspired, Clara gathers her neighbors for a meeting, not to argue but to dream. She proposes a cooperative where they pool resources to dig wells and plant drought resistant crops. The idea sparks debate, but Clara persists, drawing on Christ's parable of the mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree. Matthew 13:31 to 32. Slowly, the village unites and their cooperative begins to bear fruit, literal and figurative. Wells bring water, crops grow, and hope returns, not as a grand miracle, but as a collective effort. Clara's story shows a third step: act with courage even in uncertainty. Christ's life was a testament to this courage. He faced the cross, trusting in God's plan despite the darkness. Pope Francis calls this apostolic courage a boldness to act for the common good. For Elena, this means addressing the tension at work. The argument that shook her stemmed from a misunderstanding over a project deadline. Instead of avoiding the issue, she requests a team meeting to clear the air. She prepares by reflecting on Pope Francis's advice. In Fratelli Tutti, dialogue does not mean renouncing our own ideas, but seeking the truth together. During the meeting, Elena shares her perspective calmly, then listens as others voice their frustrations. The conversation's tense but honest, and they agree on a plan to move forward. It's not a perfect resolution, but it's a step, and Elena feels a quiet hope in having faced the conflict directly. A fourth step is to root yourself in prayer. Hope, as Pope Francis and Christ teach, is sustained by a connection to God. In Amoris Laetitia, Pope Francis writes, prayer opens our hearts to God's grace, allowing us to see others and ourselves with His eyes. Jesus often withdrew to pray, finding strength in communion with the Father. Luke 5:16. Elena deepens her practice of evening silence, now incorporating the examine a prayerful reflection from Ignatian spirituality. She asks herself, where did I see hope today? Where did I struggle? What is God inviting me to do tomorrow? This practice grounds her, reminding her that hope is not her own creation but a gift from the vine, the source of all life. As Elena, Daniel, and Clara show us, hope is a living force, nurtured through presence, celebration, courage, and prayer. These steps are not a formula but a rhythm, a way of moving through the world with faith. Elena feels this rhythm as she walks to the food bank where Javier greets her with a warm smile. He shares that he's found a part time job, a small but significant step towards stability. They celebrate with a shared meal, and Elena feels a surge of hope, not because the world's problems are solved, but because she's part of something bigger, a community of people choosing to lift each other up. This sense of community deepens when Elena attends a parish event inspired by Pope Francis' World Day of the Poor. The event brings together people from all walks of life, families, immigrants, the homeless, for a day of service and fellowship. Elena helps serve food, and as she hands a plate to a young boy, she sees his eyes light up. His mother, a single parent, shares her gratitude, and Elena feels a connection that transcends their differences. The event is a microcosm of solidarity, a reminder of Christ's words. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Matthew 25:40. Pope Francis calls this a church that goes forth, a community that embodies hope by serving the vulnerable. Elena's journey, like Daniel's and Clara's, is not without setbacks. Sophia's unanswered text stings, and work tensions flare again. But hope rooted in faith gives her resilience. She thinks of Pope Francis' words in Space Non Confunded. Hope is a journey, not a possession. It grows in the heart of those who walk with others, who trust in God, and who dare to love. Elena dares to love, to keep reaching out, to keep praying. She sends Sophia another message offering to meet again, and this time Sophia responds. They plan to have dinner, a small step toward healing. At work, Elena continues to foster dialogue, and slowly the team finds a better rhythm. These are mustard seeds, small but growing signs of hope in a war torn world. Imagine a world where each of us embraced one act of solidarity each day, listening to a stranger, celebrating a friend's success, acting with courage, praying for strength. These acts multiplied across millions could transform despair into possibility, division into unity. Elena feels this possibility as she stands in her parish surrounded by people who, like her, are trying to live with hope. She thinks of Christ's promise, I am with you always, to the very end of the age. Matthew 28:20. That presence is her anchor, her vine, her source of hope. The city's lights twinkle below her balcony, each one a story, a life, a chance for hope. Elena knows the journey is far from over, but she's not afraid. Guided by Christ's teachings and Pope Francis' wisdom, she steps forward, ready to bear fruit, to be a branch in a world that needs healing. And as she does, the path widens, inviting others to join, to walk together toward a future where hope is not just a dream, but a reality woven into the fabric of every heart. The evening air is cool as Elena steps out of the restaurant, the warmth of her dinner with Sophia, lingering like a quiet melody. Their conversation wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, old hurts that surfaced, but it was honest. They laughed over shared memories, cried over past mistakes, and agreed to keep trying. As Elena walks home, the city's lights seem to pulse with a gentle rhythm mirroring the hope in her heart. Yet she knows this hope is fragile, tested by the world's relentless challenges. The news still carries stories of division. Her workplace remains a pressure cooker, and her own doubts whisper, "Can I keep this up? Can I really make a difference?" These questions lead her to a deeper truth, one that Pope Francis and Christ illuminate: the call to perseverance, to carry the cross of love through life's trials, trusting that every step matters. This call to perseverance is woven into the fabric of Christ's teachings and Pope Francis' vision. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus tells his disciples, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." Luke 9:23. The cross is not just a symbol of suffering, but a commitment to love even when it's costly. Pope Francis expands on this in Gaudete et Exsultate, writing, "Holiness does not mean being untouched by life's struggles, but persevering through them with faith, hope, and charity." For Elena, perseverance means showing up day after day for her relationships, her community, and her own growth, even when the path feels steep. The weight of this call is real. Elena thinks of her recent argument at work, where a colleague's harsh words left her feeling small. She thinks of Sophia, whose hesitance to fully reconnect reminds her how fragile trust is. And she thinks of the world beyond, communities torn by poverty, families displaced by conflict, ecosystems strained by neglect. Yet, in these challenges, she finds inspiration in the stories of others who embody perseverance, proving that love can endure even the darkest storms. Consider the story of Sister Rosa, a nun working in a slum in Manila. The streets she serves are crowded with makeshift homes where families struggle for food and safety. Sister Rosa has seen children go hungry, parents lose hope, and violence flare like wildfire. Yet every morning she rises to run a small school for the children, teaching them to read, sing, and dream. Her work is often met with setbacks, funding shortages, government red tape, the sheer scale of need. But Sister Rosa draws strength from Christ's words: "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Galatians 6:9. She also finds solace in Pope Francis' Laudato Si, where he writes, "We are called to be instruments of God's peace, to care for the poor and the earth with unwavering commitment." Sister Rosa perseveres by focusing on one child, one lesson, one day at a time. Her school, though small, is a beacon, giving children a chance to break free from poverty's grip. Her perseverance transforms despair into possibility, one stubborn step at a time. Sister Rosa's story strikes a chord with Elena. She sees in her a model of steadfast love, a reminder that perseverance is not about grand victories, but about fidelity to the small, sacred work of each day. Elena decides to apply this to her own life, starting with her workplace. The argument that stung her involved a project deadline that her team missed, leading to blame and frustration. Instead of retreating, Elena resolves to persevere in building trust. She organizes a follow up meeting, not to rehash the conflict, but to focus on solutions. Drawing on Pope Francis' advice in Fratelli Tutti, seek the common good even when it requires sacrifice, she proposes a new timeline and offers to take on extra tasks to ease the team's stress. Her colleague, initially defensive, softens and the team begins to collaborate again. It's not a perfect fix, but it's progress, a testament to the power of showing up. This is the first practical step. Show up even when it's hard. Christ modeled this in his journey to the cross, continuing his mission despite betrayal, rejection, and pain. Pope Francis calls this missionary endurance a willingness to keep going for the sake of love. For us, this might mean returning to a difficult conversation with a family member, volunteering again after a discouraging day, or tackling a personal goal despite setbacks. Showing up is an act of faith, a belief that God works through our persistence. Elena applies this to her relationship with Sophia. After their dinner, Sophia's hesitance makes Elena want to pull back to protect herself from further hurt. But she remembers Sister Rosa's example and chooses to persevere. She sends Sophia a short, heartfelt note. I'm so glad we talked. I'm here whenever you're ready for more. To her surprise, Sophia responds a few days later, suggesting they meet again. Their next conversation is lighter, more open, as they share stories of their childhood. It's a small step, but Elena feels the weight of their rift lifting, replaced by the slow, steady work of rebuilding trust. A second step emerges, focus on the present task. Pope Francis often speaks of the spirituality of the moment, urging us to find God in the work at hand. In Amoris Laetitia, he writes, God is present in the daily details of our lives. In the ordinary tasks we undertake with love. Jesus lived this, whether he was healing a blind man, teaching a crowd, or breaking bread with his disciples. Each moment was infused with purpose. For Elena, this means breaking her challenges into manageable pieces. At the food bank, she focuses on one interaction at a time, like helping Javier fill out a job application. At work, she tackles one project task before worrying about the next. This focus keeps her grounded, preventing overwhelm and fueling her perseverance. Let's shift to another story, one that deepens this vision of perseverance. In a small town in South Africa, a man named Thabo runs a community garden. His town struggles with unemployment and crime, and the garden is a lifeline, providing food and a sense of purpose. But drought and vandalism threaten its survival. Thabo, a devout Christian, feels the temptation to give up. One evening, he reads Pope Francis Evangelii Gaudium, we must not let ourselves be paralyzed by difficulties. God calls us to act with boldness, to trust that our efforts, however small, bear fruit in His time. Inspired, Thabo rallies his neighbors to protect the garden. They build a fence, dig a new irrigation system, and start a youth program to teach kids about farming. The work is grueling and progress is slow, but Thabo perseveres, trusting in Christ's parable of the sower. Other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 160 or 30 times what was sown. Matthew 13:8. Today, the garden not only feeds the community, but also fosters unity as neighbors work side by side. Thabo's perseverance turns a patch of dirt into a symbol of resilience. Thabo's story inspires Elena to see her own efforts as seeds planted with faith. She begins to view her work at the food bank, her lunches with co workers, and her talks with Sophia as part of a larger harvest. This perspective fuels a third step, trust in the long view. Christ's teachings often point to eternity. Think of his promise. My kingdom is not of this world, John 18:36, or his assurance that God sees every act of love, Matthew 6:4. Pope Francis echoes this in Spes non confundit, writing, our actions may seem small, but in God's eyes they are part of a greater plan, a tapestry of grace. For Elena, trusting the long view means accepting that she may not see immediate results. Sophia's trust may take years to fully rebuild. Her workplace may always have tensions, but each act of love is a seed and God is the gardener bringing growth in his time. Elena puts this into practice by starting a new project at the food bank, a mentorship program pairing volunteers with clients to help with job skills and resources. The program is slow to take off, scheduling is tricky, and some clients are skeptical. But Elena perseveres. Inspired by Thabo's garden, She focuses on one mentee, a young woman named Leela who dreams of becoming a nurse but lacks confidence. Elena meets with her weekly, helping her study for a certification exam. Lila's progress is uneven, but Elena trusts the long view, celebrating each small step. One day, Leela passes a practice test, her face lighting up with pride. It's a moment of harvest, a reminder that perseverance bears fruit even if it takes time. A fourth step is to lean on community. Perseverance is not a solo journey, it thrives in connection. In Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis writes, no one can face life in isolation. We need a community that supports and helps us, in which we can help one another to keep looking ahead. Jesus built such a community with his disciples sharing meals, prayers, and struggles. Elena leans on her parish where she joins a small faith group. They meet weekly to pray, discuss Pope Francis' teachings, and share their challenges. When Elena feels discouraged about work, or Sophia, the group listens, prays for her, and offers encouragement. Their support is a lifeline reminding her that she is not alone in carrying her cross. This sense of community deepens when Elena attends a diocesan retreat inspired by Pope Francis' World Day of Peace. The retreat gathers people from across the city, young and old, rich and poor, locals and immigrants, for a day of reflection and service. Elena helps lead a workshop on forgiveness, sharing her journey with Sophia. To her surprise, others open up about their own struggles, estranged siblings, broken friendships, personal regrets. The workshop becomes a space of healing as participants pray together and commit to small acts of reconciliation. Elena feels a surge of strength, knowing she's part of a larger movement, a church that perseveres in love. As Elena's sister Rosa and Thabo show us, perseverance is a sacred rhythm, showing up, focusing on the present, trusting the long view, and leaning on community. These steps sustain us through life's trials, turning crosses into stepping stones. Elena feels this as she walks to the park for another co worker lunch. David brings his camera, capturing Priya laughing as she tells a story. The moment is ordinary but profound, a glimpse of the harvest that perseverance yields. Elena thinks of Christ's words, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. John 10, 10. That fullness, she realizes, is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of love cultivated through steadfast effort. Elena's journey is not without setbacks. A new conflict at work tests her patience, and Sophia cancels a planned coffee date, citing a busy schedule. But Elena perseveres, drawing on her faith. She prays the words of Psalm 23, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Pope Francis' wisdom in Gaudete et Exsultate bolsters her. The path to holiness is a path of perseverance, of carrying the cross with joy, knowing that God is with us. Elena keeps showing up, sending Sophia a kind text, addressing the work conflict with calm dialogue, and continuing her mentorship with Laila. Each act is a choice to love, a refusal to let discouragement win. Imagine a world where each of us persevered in one act of love each day, reaching out after rejection, tackling a task despite fatigue, trusting God's plan amid uncertainty. These acts, multiplied across billions, could weave a tapestry of resilience, healing the war torn corners of our world. Elena feels this possibility as she stands in her parish singing a hymn with her faith group. The music rises, a chorus of voices united in hope. She thinks of Pope Francis' words in Evangelii Gaudium, let us go forth, then let us go forth to offer everyone the life of Jesus Christ. That life, she knows, is one of perseverance, a daily choice to carry the cross and plant seeds of love. The city's rhythm hums outside, a reminder that the journey continues. Elena steps onto her balcony, the herbs now thriving, a small sign of growth. She feels connected to Sister Rosa Thabo and countless others who persevere in love. Guided by Christ's teachings and Pope Francis's call, she moves forward, ready to face the next challenge. knowing that every step is a victory, every cross a chance to rise. And as she does, the path grows brighter, inviting others to join in the sacred work of healing a world that longs for peace. The city exhales into twilight, its skyline a mosaic of glowing windows, each a story unfolding in the quiet of evening. Elena stands at her kitchen counter, chopping vegetables for a simple soup, the rhythm of the knife steadying her thoughts. Her journey through reconnection with Sophia, solidarity with co workers, hope amid setbacks and perseverance through trials, has woven a new thread into her life, a sense of mission. She feels it in the small acts that now define her days, mentoring Leela at the food bank, sharing lunches with Priya and David, praying with her faith group. Yet, as she stirs the pot, a deeper call emerges, one that asks not just for action but for transformation. How do we become vessels of God's love, not just in moments, but as a way of being in a world that hungers for healing? This call to transformation is the culmination of Christ's teachings and Pope Francis's vision. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus declares, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Matthew chapter 5, 14-16. This light is not a fleeting glow, but a radiant, transformative presence born of a heart aligned with love. Pope Francis amplifies this in Gaudete et Exsultat, writing, "We are all called to be whole by living our lives with love and by bearing witness in everything we do, wherever we find ourselves." For Elena, transformation means becoming that light not through grand gestures, but through a life reshaped by compassion, justice, and faith, a life that reflects God's love in every encounter. The scope of this call feels vast, almost overwhelming. Elena thinks of the world's wounds, war, poverty, division, and her own limitations. She's not a global leader or a saint. She's a woman navigating a demanding job, a fragile family bond, and the ordinary stresses of city life. Yet, the stories of others who have embraced this transformation show her that holiness is not reserved for the extraordinary, but woven into the everyday, accessible to all who choose it. Consider the story of Lin, a factory worker in Vietnam. Lin's life is one of routine long hours at a textile plant, caring for her elderly mother, stretching a modest income to cover bills. The factory is a pressure cooker, with co workers clashing over quotas and managers pushing for more output. Lin, a Catholic, feels the strain, but she finds strength in Christ's Sermon on the Mount. "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." Matthew 5:7. She also draws inspiration from Pope Francis's Fratelli Tutti, where he writes, "Every human person is called to be a sign of God's love to transform the world through acts of mercy and justice." Lynn begins to live this out in small ways. She shares her lunch with a struggling co worker, mediates disputes on the factory floor, and organizes a collection to help a colleague with medical bills. At home, she cares for her mother with patience, seeing it as a sacred duty. These acts transform her workplace and home, creating ripples of kindness that inspire others. Lynn's life becomes a light not because she seeks recognition, but because she chooses love in every moment. Lynn's story resonates with Elena, who sees in her a mirror of her own potential. Transformation, she realizes, is not about changing the world overnight, but about changing herself, her heart, her choices, her way of being. She begins to approach her life with a new intention to be a vessel of God's love, starting where she stands. At the food bank, she notices Laila's growing confidence as they prepare for her certification exam. Instead of just teaching skills, Elena shares her own story of doubt and resilience, encouraging Laila to see her potential as a gift from God. Leela's eyes light up, and Elena feels a spark of transformation, not just in Leela, but in herself as she becomes a source of light. This is the first practical step: live with intention. Christ's life was marked by intentionality. Every healing, teaching, and sacrifice was a deliberate act of love. Pope Francis calls this missionary discipleship a conscious choice to live for others. For Elena, it means starting each day with a prayer, Lord, make me an instrument of your love. This prayer shapes her actions from how she speaks to coworkers to how she listens to Sophia. For us, living with intention might mean pausing before reacting to a harsh comment, choosing kindness over anger, or dedicating time to serve others. It's a shift in mindset, a commitment to make every moment count. Elna puts this into practice at work where tensions still simmer. A new project brings stress, and her colleague Mark, once short tempered but now more open, struggles to keep up. Instead of frustration, Elena approaches him with intention. She asks, how can I support you? And offers to review his work. Mark, touched by her patience, reciprocates by helping her with a task. Their collaboration strengthens the team, showing how intentional acts of love can transform a workplace. Elena also applies this to Sophia, choosing to text her not out of obligation but with genuine care, sharing a memory of their childhood to spark joy. Sophia responds warmly, and their bond deepens, a small but real transformation. A second step emerges: embrace vulnerability. Transformation requires us to be open to let God's light shine through our cracks. In Amoris Laetitia, Pope Francis writes, love is not afraid to show weakness, for it is in our fragility that God's strength is revealed. Jesus embodied this on the cross, vulnerably offering himself for humanity's redemption. Elena learns this through her faith group, where she shares her fears about failing at work with Sophia in her mission to live faithfully. To her surprise, others share similar struggles, and their honesty creates a bond of trust. This vulnerability transforms the group into a true community where each person's light shines brighter because of their shared humanity. Let's shift to another story, one that deepens this vision of transformation. In a refugee camp in Jordan, a young man named Omar works as a teacher for displaced children. The camp is a place of hardship, scarce resources, uncertain futures, and the trauma of war. Omar, a Muslim who admires Pope Francis' interfaith outreach, finds inspiration in the Pope's words in Evangelii Gaudium. We are called to be a church that goes forth to bring the joy of God's love to every corner of the world. Omar also reflects on Christ's parable of the Good Samaritan, Luke 19:37, which calls us to love without boundaries. He transforms his classroom into a haven, teaching not just math and reading but also art and music to help children heal. When a new family arrives fearful and withdrawn, Omar visits their tent, sharing tea and listening to their story. His vulnerability, admitting his own fears about the future, builds trust, and the family begins to engage with the camp community. Omar's presence transforms the camp not by erasing its challenges but by creating spaces of hope and dignity. Omar's story inspires Elena to see vulnerability as a strength. She applies this at the food bank, where she opens up to Javier about her own struggles with disconnection before her journey began. Javier, moved by her honesty, shares his fears about his new job, and they pray together, strengthening their bond. This vulnerability transforms their mentorship into a mutual exchange where both grow. For us, embracing vulnerability might mean admitting a mistake to a friend, asking for help at work, or sharing a personal struggle in prayer. It's a risk that invites God's transformative grace into our lives. A third step is to act justly. Transformation is not just personal, but communal, requiring us to address the systems that wound our world. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis writes, we are called to care for our common home and to work for justice, ensuring that every person has the dignity they deserve. Jesus modeled this in his challenge to the Pharisees, calling out hypocrisy and advocating for the marginalized. Matthew 23:23-24. Elena begins to see her work at the food bank as more than charity. It's a call to justice to address the root causes of hunger. She joins a community advocacy group that lobbies for better wages and housing, attending meetings to learn and contribute. Her voice, once timid, grows stronger as she speaks for those like Javier and Laila. This work it transforms her, giving her a sense of agency and purpose. Elena's advocacy extends to her workplace, where she notices unequal workloads affecting junior staff. Drawing on Pope Francis' call in Fratelli Tutti to build a society that includes everyone, she proposes a mentorship program to support new employees, ensuring they have guidance and opportunities. Her manager agrees, and the program begins to shift the workplace culture, fostering fairness and collaboration. Acting justly transforms Elena from a bystander to a changemaker, her light shining brighter with each step. A fourth step is to cultivate joy. Transformation is sustained by the joy of knowing we are loved by God and called to share that love. In Evangelii Gaudium, Pope Francis writes, "The joy of the gospel fills the hearts and lives of all who encounter Jesus." Jesus radiated this joy whether celebrating at the wedding at Cana or welcoming children with open arms, Mark 10:13 to 16. Elena cultivates joy by savoring small moments. Lila's smile after a study session, Priya's laughter at lunch, a hymn sung with her faith group. She starts a gratitude journal noting three things each day that bring her joy, from a kind word to a sunset. This practice transforms her perspective, helping her see God's presence even in tough moments. This joy spills over into her relationships. At a park lunch, Elena organizes a small celebration for David's birthday, complete with cupcakes and a card signed by the group. David usually reserved beams, and the group's laughter echoes through the park. The moment is simple but transformative, a reminder that joy binds us together. Elena also shares this joy with Sofia, inviting her to a parish festival. Sofia hesitates but joins, and they dance to live music, their laughter, a bridge over past hurts. Joy transforms their relationship, making healing feel possible. As Elena Ling and Omar show us, transformation is a way of life, living with intention, embracing vulnerability, acting justly, and cultivating joy. These steps reshape us into vessels of God's love lights that shine in a war torn world. Elena feels this as she serves soup at the food bank, where Javier announces he's been promoted at his job. They celebrate with a cheer, and Elena sees the ripple effect of her efforts: Lila's confidence, Javier's stability, Sophia's openness. She thinks of Christ's promise, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." John 8:12. That light, she knows, shines through her, not because she's perfect, but because she's trying. Elena's journey is not without challenges. A setback at work, a delayed project tests her patience, and Sophia's occasional distance reminds her that healing takes time. But transformation gives her resilience. She prays the words of Psalm 139, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. Lead me in the way everlasting." Pope Francis' words in Spes non confundit bolster her hope is the courage to become what God dreams for us, to let His love transform us into signs of His kingdom. Elena keeps living with intention, sharing her struggles, advocating for justice, and finding joy, knowing each act is a step toward holiness. Imagine a world where each of us embraced one transformative act each day, choosing love over indifference, vulnerability over pride, justice over apathy, joy over despair. These acts multiplied across billions could heal the world's deepest wounds, weaving a tapestry of light. Elena feels this possibility as she stands in her parish holding hands with her faith group in prayer. The city's pulse hums outside, a reminder that the mission continues. She thinks of Pope Francis' call in Christus Vivit, be a light for others, a sign of God's love in the world. Elena steps onto her balcony. The herbs now lush, a testament to growth. The city sparkles below each light, a life, a chance to shine. Guided by Christ's teachings and Pope Francis's wisdom, she moves forward, transformed and transforming, a vessel of love in a world that needs it. The journey is complete, yet ever new, a call to be the light to heal the war torn world, one radiant act at a time.